Hey guys, it's Matt. So in my last video, we talked about budgeting. We talked about how to create a budget. We talked about this budgetary spreadsheet that I'd created and how do you go about utilizing it. So if you haven't already, definitely go ahead and check out that video. I'll include a link for it towards the tail end of this video as well. What I wanted to talk about in this video is really an extension of that same spreadsheet, right? So when it comes to developing your budget, you need to be able to make some tangible actions associated with it. And two of those actions, which people typically have to make, is one, okay, how much home can I afford based on this budget that has been created? And secondarily, how much of a car can I afford based on this budget that has been created? So we'll talk about both of those aspects in this video. I'll do a quick recap of the prior video in this as well, and then let's get into the spreadsheet because that's what we're all here for anyway. So if you had looked at the last video, the spreadsheet should appear very familiar. It's got all of your key components that we basically talked about. It's got this budgeting tool aspect. We talked about the needs and the wants and the savings, extra investments, debt payments. We talked about gross income, net income. We also covered off on this budgetary tab, which has all these line items that you can basically input, some of the historical components and all of that. All of that input related items was all shared in the prior video. So in this video, what we'll specifically focus on is this section down here, which is titled Mortgage Affordability, and then we will also talk about car affordability. So let me make that a little bit bigger so we can see it fairly easily. Okay, so let's talk about mortgage affordability first. So when it comes to mortgage affordability, there's a rule called the 2836 rule. This is also a rule that your lenders use. Lenders use this particular rule in determining whether you should be financed for a loan or not, or they will go ahead and reject you. So it's kind of an important rule in that context to know how it basically works. So what that 28% number on that rule basically says is that your total amount on your expenses for your home, right, which is your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, condo association fees, all of that should basically not exceed 28% of your gross income. The 36 number there basically means that all of that principal, interest, taxes, insurance, all of that stuff that we just talked about, right, plus your student loan debt, plus any car note or a car loan debt that you may have, plus credit card debt, plus personal loans debt. All of that, right, in total should not exceed 36% of your gross income. Once you start exceeding some of those bounds, then there's a higher likelihood that the lender will in fact reject you when it comes to buying your home. So how this spreadsheet basically works is I've outlined two rows here. One is the 28% rule and the 36% rule. And it's basically a calculation, right? So when you go about determining how much of a home that you are planning on buying, what you would essentially need to do is include some of that amount in these rows, right? So you would include, hey, this is what my mortgage payment's going to be, my principal, interest, taxes, and insurance in row 5 here. You would also need to include homeowners association fees if that is specifically applicable to you. You enter some of those amounts, and once you have entered them, you would basically let the spreadsheet do the calculation for you. So what this spreadsheet is basically saying, it's taking a combination of cells H5 and 6, right, which is basically this $1,000 plus this one, and let's just put in a number here, right? Let's just say it's $500, so it's $1,500. And what it's doing is that it's basically dividing it on your gross income, which you entered up above. So that's that $6,000 number. And what it's basically saying is, hey, you're at about 25%. So the 28% rule is basically intact. Your assessment for all intents and purposes is green. You are okay to go. Now, if I were to change this and say, maybe take up this principal, interest, taxes piece to say $2,500, and if I go back to the summary spreadsheet, what you'll quickly see is the assessment has changed to red because now we are saying that, hey, you're at about 50% of your gross income, so this is potentially a problem and you're potentially going to get rejected. So you want to ensure, right, these numbers do not exceed 28% of your gross income. Now, in the bottom here, what we also have is this 36% rule. The 36% rule is not only a combination of your home loans and all of that we talked about, but it's also your car payments and your student loan payments and so on and so forth. So there are specific cells that are already in this spreadsheet that you would essentially need to fill out, and it will basically do all the math for you. So this row for here, for example, minimum debt payments and credit card. So let's just say, for example, you're making $500 in debt payments on your credit card, and then there's another row all the way down here, which which talks about minimum debt payments on your student loans. Let's just say you're making another $500 in payments on that. And then you also have some personal loans. Let's say you're making $200 in payments on that. So the combination of all of that debt basically is what it's going to spit out here, because it's basically going to take that amount of debt and divide it by your gross income and see if you're going to exceed this 36% rule or not. And what this assessment is basically saying is red, no go. Your debt is too high. You are going to get rejected by a particular lending institution when it comes to affording your home. So that's where this calculator comes in handy, right? You can play around with this in terms of determining, how much your expenses are, how much of a home can you actually afford, and then basically reduce these numbers and figure out how much of a mortgage you can actually get into, such that this basically does work for you. So that's this mortgage affordability piece and how that part essentially works. The other part of that this spreadsheet also does for you is this car affordability calculator. So there's a rule called the 24-10 rule. What this rule basically says is that when you're going to go ahead and buy a car, you should put 20% down. You should not finance the car for more than 4 years, and then you should have the car should not be more than 10% of your gross income on a monthly basis. And if you stay within those bounds, you should be okay in terms of whatever car it is that you want to buy. So if you're going to be a believer or a purveyor of this whole 24-10 rule, this spreadsheet does that calculation as well for you. So it will just take your car price amount, which you need to enter. So let's just say you're entering, I'm going to buy a car for, let's just say $30,000. Okay. $30,000, and then this will say that, hey, okay, so to do the 20% down, your down payment on this car note should be $6,000, right, which is 20% of this $30,000. And then what it's also saying is, hey, what is your car payment going to be? So that is where you go to this particular cell and you say, hey, these are my minimum car payments in row 10. You would say, let's just put in $500 a month, because that's the average in terms of how much Americans pay for their car every month. You put that in, it does the math for you. It says that, hey, you're sitting at 8%, so you are good from an assessment perspective. You can go ahead and afford this car or this vehicle. Now, obviously, if this number is going to be any higher, then it does create a problem, right? So say if you're affording like some kind of a luxury vehicle that's going to run you $1,000 a month, now you start hitting the red. You've gone too high from a car affordability perspective, and especially taken in conjunction with your overarching budget, and that's where it will become a problem. So that, in a nutshell, is how this spreadsheet works, right? It's all-encompassing. It talks about the 50-30-20 rule. You can then take that budget to basically understand whether you can make certain decisions, whether how much of a house you can afford, how much of a car you can afford, where you can tighten things up, how you can potentially save more, how you can get out of debt faster. So it talks about all of this stuff all in one location, which will hopefully be very productive and very useful for you if you are actually using this in the right way. So I hope you got some value out of this video. If you did, absolutely subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so that you're notified on other videos that I issue as well. And definitely click the like button as well, and I will see you soon.